Hello, I'm Greg Radke Mods, and welcome to episode 2 of season 2 of my PowerPC series. In this episode, we'll be introducing you to the computer that was somewhat the topic of episode 2 of the first season, and that would be my PowerBook G4 High Res. This was the very last PowerBook model ever made, and it was the most advanced and most modern. It was also the most powerful too. And it's a very useful system today still, and it's a very, very interesting system. This was kind of like a transition system between PowerPC and Intel. This was introduced with the late 2005 PowerBook G5 also. The thing is, this system only was made for 3 months, where that system was made into around, I think it was late August of 2006, and they continued selling it on into October. This system they only made 3 months, about 3.5, from October to I think it was around February. And they didn't sell very well. This was not a very popular system at the time to buy brand new. This system right here was a system that like I said, was a weird transition system. This has a lot of features that ended up carrying over to the MacBook Pro. This has DDR2 memory in it, a bunch of other really neat, interesting things. The LCD panel is a high resolution one, which is a 1440 by 900 or something like that. But it's a very, very high def screen compared to the model before this. The model before this, of course, was the early 2005 model. It had basically the same G4 in it, 1.67 gigahertz, but it was a lower resolution screen. It used DDR1, and it used the old-fashioned Airport Extreme cards like this one right here. So this system didn't. This system uses the same Airport Extreme card that was in the late 2005 PowerBook G5. Only the G5, the runway card, it was called, was on a daughter board to plug into that system, and it used the same interface. This uses a proprietary ZIF connector. You just clip it into the board. But other than that, it's a similar, actually, airport card to the MacBook Pro. And that's a few of the similar things. Of course, this case was originally introduced in 2003 when they introduced the aluminum PowerBooks in general. And this system's case, more or less, the design, all the features of it, sort of carried on through 2008 with the non-unibody system of the MacBook Pros. So it's a very interesting system, and it's a very useful system. These systems can go up to 2 gigahertz overclocked. This one hasn't been overclocked, but even in its stock form, it's still very useful. And another thing about not selling very well, most of these that were sold after everything was over with, most of these were sold when they stopped making them as high discount systems. When they released the MacBook Pro, a lot of people went out and bought these because at the time these things were pretty similar in performance to the MacBook Pro, and of course had the backwards compatibility with Classic and all that stuff. So, you know, most of those got carried over from that. So, like I said, it's a very neat system, very modern for what it is. And this system right here is very special. Last season I showed you me installing the SSD into it. This system works extremely great, extremely fast, 2 gigs of DDR2 RAM in it, and it's running 4 operating systems on it right now. Tiger, Leopard, and 2 copies of Linux, Ubuntu Mate and Lubuntu. We'll show you each and every one of those, what this system can do, and what modern uses we can use it for. I use this almost every day as a web browser, believe it or not, and it can do it. So sit back and enjoy. And here's my PowerBook G4 High Resolution. This is a 15-inch, and like I said before, they made these for roughly 3.5 months. This is the ultimate that you can get on any PowerBook ever made. And in fact, the 15-inch was marginally faster than the 17-inch and had a slightly sharper screen because it was a slightly lower resolution and it was a smaller screen. So everything PPI-wise was closer together. It really wasn't ever noticeable in speed difference, but it was slightly quicker. And this system was the most ultimate of everything. This is the system that can really be the ultimate PowerPC OS X gaming machine from any game made from around 2006 back, where the PowerBook Titanium 1 gigahertz was the ultimate. This is an 867 megahertz, by the way. Where these were the ultimate OS 9 mobile gaming systems, this was the ultimate OS X PowerPC gaming system. And you'll be seeing a little bit about that in a second. But first off, I thought we'd quickly go over, this was the system design that was introduced in 2003, the aluminum PowerBooks. And they introduced the 12-inch, the 15-inch, and the 17-inch. This is the middle one. The 15 and 17 were always updated with power and stuff. When this one came out, the 17 High Res also came out. The 12-inch stayed the same. It was the same early 2005 model, and they sold that one until the MacBooks were introduced in somewhere near mid-spring of 2006, I think. But this system was discontinued when the MacBook Pro was introduced. And this system was very different. It's harder to work on than, for instance, the Titanium. If you want to change out RAM, you need a screwdriver. There's a RAM door on the bottom, which we'll show you in a second. And if you want to do various other things with the system, you've got to take it apart, which currently I'm not going to do in this video. But you've seen some of the insides if you've watched episode 2 of last season. But yeah, this was the Titanium. That case design is what replaced it. The Titanium, of course, had a lot of little differences. Screen aspect ratio and stuff. You know, how the hinges were made, and that were all the ports were on the back. On the aluminums, in this case though, they weren't. They're down the sides. We'll take this, grab this, pull it over here, pick this up. On the right side, we have the Kensington lock, USB 2, FireWire 400, FireWire 800, Ethernet, and S-video out, plus a DVI. On the left side, we have the power, dial-up modem, USB 2, audio in, audio out, and a PC card slot. This was the very last Mac notebook to come with a PC card slot. After that, they used Express cards. So this will work with any PC card made from the late 90s all the way through around that time period. Anything that was made after any PC card. But of course, Express was better. It's based off of PCIe, and anyway. So getting back to the point, this system, when I bought it, was from a seller who refurbished these systems, and this system's probably made out of a multiple stack of different machines, but he said he used the best parts he had at the time, and it's in pretty good shape. But the only problem it had was the hinge. This thing wouldn't close, okay? Anytime you'd push it down, it just sprang back up because the latch was broken. These latches are pretty cheap, and this is what the latch assembly looks like right here. Now the problem was there was a piece of metal right here that was broken off, and I'll show you what that piece of metal looks like. From what I can tell, the hook in the screen, we'll push this in, and it's caught. Come on. The hook in the screen, that hook that comes down right there, that comes out right here, was apparently down a little bit, and someone tried to forcefully slam it into here, and it snapped that piece of metal right there off, so there was nothing to latch onto. I swapped that piece out, as we can see here, and it now closes by itself like that. That was the only major problem with the system. The other problem was the keyboard. When I got it, this key right here was glued on with super glue, and the seller said he didn't even know about it, but he, you know, didn't try to cover anything up. He sent me a new key to replace it with. I had to pull it all apart. This key here, all the assembly and stuff was caked in super glue. I had to clean it out with acetone and a bunch of other stuff, and now it works. Whole new keycap and everything. That was the only other major problem. There's a small spot on the screen right here, but other than that, one small dent in it, like right here. You can't really see it in the lighting. Yeah, you can see it right here. Small dent. There's a few scratches on the top, and the bottom's a little scratched up, but still. On the bottom we have the RAM door and the battery. This is an aftermarket battery. It came with the system. It holds a great charge. I use this without the charger all the time, and I'll actually be booting this up off battery just to show you. And it's just a great little system. So we'll open this up and turn it on. Now this thing's going to boot into Leopard, and let's get on to it. Turn off my light, and here it comes. And we are booted up. This system right now has the Leopard Rebirth theme on it. As we can see, it looks more like Yosemite, Sierra, something like that. The only thing I hate about this theme is the About This Mac says it's Mac OS Sierra, which drives me crazy. I can't stand that. But other than that, this is a great theme, except for the dock rebirth part down here. The dock rebirth is a overlay black dock which goes behind this dock, and it sometimes overlays itself on other things. So I've disabled that from starting up. So I'm using a transparent dock. Other than that, this is basically it. It's a very nice theme, gives it a modern feeling to it. We'll go over to look at the specs real quick. We can see that this is the high res model. Let's see here. Here's the RAM. It's got DDR2 in it, and it's got my mSATA SSD in it, 256 gig, and this is where it's really fun. Now, the model before this had the same GPU in it, but of course a smaller resolution screen, and most of them came with 64 megs of RAM, VRAM. There was a high video memory model, which had the 128 option, but no one seemed to buy them. I don't really know if anyone really knew about them. But this came from the factory with 128. All High Res did. And that helps with games. And also it helps with encoding and a whole lot of other interesting things. Let's see here. We'll now go over other things. This system's very useful for everything. 10.4 Fox works great. I use 10.4 Fox all the time. It does have some issues in OS X, doing certain things like Facebook. It's just a little slow. I usually use the iOS user agent on here, but it looks like I may not be using it right now. So it's slow. Yeah, I'm not using it right now. But it's still useful. Still very useful to use. It just takes a while to load up. But it works. And if I was using this in the iOS user agent, it's very quick. I use this as a web browser all the time. It will also play YouTube videos pretty decently, which we'll show you in a second. But right now we'll get back to that. What I would like to do now is show you some games. As we can see down here, we have Call of Duty 2, Quake 4, and Doom 3. They all play. Call of Duty 2 it requires a G5, but it works on here. It's a little sluggish sometimes, but it works. And these games aren't really optimized for these systems, but they'll still play quite well with lower graphics settings. Now, we could play these games on something like a MacBook Pro from this time period, but when you get into stuff like Doom 3, Rosetta was killed off in Lion. So if you have Lion on that MacBook Pro, unless you're also running Snow Leopard, you can't run Doom 3. So that's a drawback, where you can run this natively on PowerPC hardware, and there won't be any slowdown or anything, which you could get on an Intel machine. So we're not going to play Doom 3 or Call of Duty 2, just because I want to keep this video kind of brief. But we will definitely play Quake 4, so I'll grab the disc and we'll play that. Okay, so you don't think there's any trickery here. We do still have this. This is the computer, and as we look down here, it's the computer. So what we're going to do is boot it into Quake, and let's go. Okay, we'll load one of my save games. Now, just in case you guys are curious, let's see here. This is the game settings I'm using right now. I have ran this at full resolution before and at high settings, but this is about the best because I like quality. It's still a little slow sometimes. It gets a little choppy, but it plays fine. I just like using these settings because, like I said, I like graphical quality. If I lowered it more, it would be a lot smoother, but this is still a very good setting. So let's get back to the game.
Good point. Kane, hop in the cannon and see if you can't blow open the door to the access corridor. Lieutenant Boss to all squads. We're in business. Make a sweep of the Hannibal landing zone. Rhodes, do you read me?
Yes, sir.
Get to my position ASAP.
On the way, sir.
Hey, turning out to be pretty fun, okay?
There was a game save. Let's see here. It's been a while since I've played this game.
Now passing through the stratosphere. Braking procedure has begun.
And you guys get the idea. And we are back on the desktop. I'll eject the game. And there we go. So I'll set this thing back up to where we were, and we'll continue from there. So yeah, guys, I just realized that I was playing that on battery power. As we can see here, it's still on battery power. Like I said, it's a crate battery, and since it was on battery power, it probably was throttled a little bit. So it probably would have performed even a little better. I just kind of forgot to plug it in. So from now on, we'll just have it plugged in because, well, why not? I might be doing more with the battery just running, but we'll see. So I'm going to load YouTube up just to give you an idea. It can play YouTube, but it can be kind of slow. And I just want you to have a general idea what this thing can still do in Leopard. It can do a lot more in other operating systems though. So let's get to it. Okay, so now that we've shown some gameplay, let's go over some more things about the system and cover some things I forgot to cover. The original aluminum PowerBooks, you know, the 2003 model and on, the 15-inch and 17-inch, it wasn't on the 12-inch, but the 15 and 17 introduced the backlit keyboard. We'll use this piece of tape here, and we'll cover up the sensors. And as we can see, the keyboard lights up. And then if I remove my hand and the tape from the sensors, the keyboard goes back blank. And that's, of course, for dark rooms. And these sensors will also dim the monitor and stuff like that. This system the early 2005 model, any Mac notebook since 2005 has had the multi-touch trackpads, which means you can right-click by just 2 fingers, and it will, well, that's not where it is, and it will just pop up. We'll show you one more time. 2 fingers. There we go. The multi-touch, I think, also worked on the 04 and maybe the 03 model, but you had to install a patch to do it, where these actually came from the factory like that, and would work right out the box. Now, for some reason, I can't get it to work in Tiger, but it works fine in Leopard, and it works fine in Linux. So that's a few other things I forgot to cover. The last thing before we continue showing you things about the system is DIM1 for the RAM slots sometimes dies in these systems, and I myself think it's because of the G4 is overheating. If you get a system that still has the working DIM slots, replace the thermal paste and you shouldn't have a problem, hopefully. So if you're in the market looking for one of these, make sure that both slots work. Of course, it will still work fine with 1 gig of RAM. It's still going to be pretty powerful with 1 gig of RAM, but if you want that 2 gigs, you're going to have to look for the ones that still have the working DIMMs in them, like this one. So anyway, let's continue on with the system. Now, we'll first turn off my Time Machine backup that keeps backing itself up. Stop. And we'll bring up Safari, or no, Tin4 Fox. Now, we're going to show you some YouTube. And this system, like I've said, let's turn the slide off. This system right here, it depends on what browser you're using and what operating system you're using on how smooth YouTube works. It's all different on all browsers and all operating systems. Tiger and Leopard are a little pretty similar, but basically you have to wait quite some time for the system to sync up the audio and the video, and it will take some syncing. It's going to still drop frames. It sometimes looks like a slideshow. It's not super great, but then again, like I've said in the past, you really need a dual G4 or better to play YouTube, and of course this is a single G4. Even though it's the most powerful that Apple ever released, it's still not powerful enough to decode HTML5 video, where for instance even the dual 500 G4s can decode HTML5, like I showed you in, what was it, episode 13? Yeah, episode 13 of last season, on my dual 500 G4 graphite. It worked in Safari WebKit with no problem. Of course, you couldn't make the video bigger, and you know, it had some playback issues, but it worked. This doesn't really super great. It's the best working out of the single cores, but it's still not super amazing. So what we're going to do is I'm going to flip this microphone around and we'll play some video. It might take a second for everything to sync up. We'll see. Get that connected there. Turn the volume up. And we'll play some video. It's basically a G3 PowerBook that really was way behind on the times, but it was still the most powerful laptop of the time. A little odd. It couldn't run anything past 9.1. It couldn't officially run OS X. You could do some hacks to get it to work. But This was the very last system that came with the old boot ROM, and it was the last system of all Macs that had the original rainbow logo on it. But we're not going to really talk about this system a whole lot today. We're basically going to focus more on my Pismo. This Pismo right here
Okay, and we'll come
has
out
been
of
upgraded
this.
a lot since I got it. But it's going to be upgraded more, and that's just a quick demonstration of YouTube in Leopard. Now, let's flip this back around. Okay. Now, we'll show you a few other quick things. I'll close out 10.4 Fox here. This, of course, has iMovie 09 working in it. There's some QuickTime issues, but it does load up and it does work. And honestly, iMovie works quite well on this. It's almost like using it on a G5. Apple should have really put a speed restriction on G4s and allowed the 1.5 and the 1.67 PowerBooks to use iMovie. I don't know why they didn't do it, but it does work. And other things like Photoshop work and whatnot. So anyway, so we've shown you all this in Leopard. Let's go over to Tiger, show you real quick how Tiger runs. So let's get into it. Okay, so here's the very last revision of the Open Firmware boot menu. This was the same boot menu that was on the late 2005 Power Mac G5, and I'd say it was on other ones, but I of course don't have any of those right now. I probably will in the future. I'd say all 05 systems had it. Anyway, so this was one of those boot menus where you could use the arrow keys to select everything, as we can see here. Pretty neat. So now we'll boot into Tiger, and we'll take it from there. And it's fully booted up. That's all real time. It automatically loads up Classic, and it flies. It's quite impressive what this system can do in Tiger. And it's all set up, it's running. Classic's running. Everything's going well. And of course we'll show you that it is running Tiger. And just like the late 05 Power Mac G5, there were only 2 operating systems that ever supported from Apple on this system. And that would have been Tiger and Leopard. And that was it. That was the only 2 that were supported on this system. So if you don't like those 2 and you don't want you want an older operating system, you're SOL. And of course this can't run OS 9, but it can run Classic, so it can run most OS 9 compatible stuff, but not everything. And that's why, like I say, it's good to have an OS 9 compatible system when it comes to stuff like that. So anyway, now we'll go back to the boot menu, because of course Tiger's Tiger. If you see how it performs in Leopard, that's how it performs in Tiger. Of course Tiger is slightly quicker, but still, this thing has enough horsepower where it doesn't really matter either way. This thing runs just as well in Leopard as it does in Tiger. So we'll go back to the boot menu and we'll pick up the video. Okay, so we're going to boot into Ubuntu Mate. Ubuntu Mate is a lot heavier than Lubuntu is. And it does have some slowdowns sometimes, but this system can keep up quite well. There's just a few things that don't really work on it. It's a little sluggish compared to Lubuntu. But it works better. It's got better driver support, and things work better in it. It just doesn't have as much support in Lubuntu, which you'll see in a second. But before we continue, so I'll have to explain this with Lubuntu. Lubuntu is a lot smaller. The live CD is only 900 and something megs, where Ubuntu Mate is 1.5 gigs, I think. So Ubuntu Mate has a lot more features, and it's got more customizable theme in it, and we'll see that in a second. So let's boot into Ubuntu Mate. And yes, I know I'm probably saying that all wrong. I'm not a big Linux user yet, and still. So it's starting to boot up. Now, when Linux boots up on this system, it does have one small problem. The screen brightness doesn't set itself, and the screen brightness tends to be black because the screen's brightness doesn't turn on. So it took me a while to figure out that one out. But basically, you just have to hit function and brighten it up once you think it's booted up. Now, it's not booted up yet, probably. But we'll see it in a second. Okay, so it might be booted up now, and actually the backlight's on. It's just, I don't know why it does this. We'll hit the screen brightness, and it's still not doing anything. Here we go. Yeah, it kicked the screen on. And it's still loading up, apparently. And remember, excuse me. And remember, this thing's still running on an SSD. It's running off an mSATA. And here we go. It's all loading up now. It's running off an mSATA SSD, and it's actually pretty quick, especially after everything's booted up. And we're using the Ubuntu theme here to give it more of a Mac feel. Now, I have this also on Lubuntu, and the theme doesn't quite work as well. I'd like Ubuntu Mate for the appearance and the ease of use and the features. We'll turn this the screen brightness up more. And this thing right here is kind of slow. Also, there's some light sensor problems. It will set itself lower by itself until it gets acclimated to what room it's in. As you noticed, as I was brightening it, it started turning itself down again. I don't know why it does that. And there it went again. But eventually it gets to the point where it stops doing that, and the system works fine after that. So we'll go around here and play with it some. Go over to System Monitor and show you some of the specs, what it reads. Here's basically, it's still, I think, loading stuff. It doesn't usually use this much CPU power. It usually hovers around 30%. But I have a lot of things installed on this. So here's all the specs in Ubuntu Mate. And it works quite well. Very quick. We can hear the fans ramping up because some reason it's still at 100. Like I said, this doesn't usually do that. It's just being stubborn for some reason. But everything works in it. Bluetooth works. And Wi-Fi. And even the volume works. Let's see here. Turn the volume up. Turn the volume down. Up. Down. We can even use the volume keys to do that. You have to hit the function key, but it works. All that works. Now, with Firefox, this uses the actual real Firefox. This is, I think, Firefox 47, the long-term release, long-term support of Ubuntu Mate, which this is 16.04. Hasn't had the updated version of Firefox yet. I've been trying to force it to install 57, and in theory it should work, but I can't seem to get it to work. Now, since this is a heavier version of Linux, it doesn't quite, it's not quite up to snuff for web browsing. It's a lot lighter than Leopard, and it will work web browsing better than Leopard will, but it's still a little slow for what we can use it for. I didn't finish searching that. Look, goo! But anyway, as we can see, it's pretty darn quick, very usable, and all that stuff. I have the Ubuntu Software Center because I like any of the other PowerPCs I've gotten to work. The Mate Software Center just doesn't work, so I just removed that immediately and put the regular Ubuntu one on here. It's got PPC specific software on it also, so it still works. It's also got other programs in it. I've shown off in episode 5 of the last season, and a few other things. It performs quite well in Ubuntu Mate, but still a little heavy for it. It works really well, though. It has super nice features and programs, as we can see here. You know, it's very useful, very new. It uses new software that's still supported, and it's going to be supported into early 2019. Now, Lubuntu, I believe, is going to be supported past that, but I'm not totally sure on that. So, speaking of Lubuntu, we're going to now restart the system and go into Lubuntu. And there's one major problem, which we'll show you in a second. But other than that, it's a lot faster and a much lighter operating system. So let's get to it. Okay, so I have my blue and white speakers plugged in. The USB powered speakers I use on my Power Mac blue and white. And that's because even though it's possible to get Lubuntu to use the internal speakers, it's a big pain. And it was a big pain to get the headphone jack to work. I'm still working on the regular speakers, and I actually like Lubuntu's lightness better, so I've actually been using Lubuntu more than Ubuntu Mate. But you know, the lack of sound is a bit of an issue, especially with a system that I carry around with me still. And yes, I do use this system for more than web browsing now, even though that's still, it's my second, it's still, well, it's basically my go-to for web browsing still, compared to, I have a number of MacBooks over there, and I don't use any of them. This system I actually use more for most things, and it's just because it's so cool. So anyway, we're going to go over to Lubuntu Mate here and boot into it. And it's booting up. Now, of course, this has the same brightness issues. It doesn't seem to dim itself as much as Ubuntu Mate does. Like all installs of Linux, Linux can basically run on anything, but supported software, here we go, no backlight. Oh, there it kicked on. Odd. But anyway, supported software, Linux, since it can run on basically anything, you know, all hardware is different. So get the hardware to work, you know, it's still a pain sometimes. Hey, the screen kicked on by itself for once. That's nice. Lubuntu has some issues I don't like about it. I can't fully theme it, which bugs me a little bit. Not all the windows actually theme. And there's a lot of programs that Ubuntu has that this doesn't come with. But I also have, for instance, let's see here. I use the Lubuntu, where is it? I use the Lubuntu Software Center. It actually works. But I also have the Ubuntu one. And here is the Bluetooth error that my Power Macs even get. I don't know why, because this is a different module, but it must be a... Oh, that's odd. Ah, here we go. There we go. Yeah, it's sometimes a little slow on the draw here, but it works. Everything works. You can search whatever you want to run, but of course I like Ubuntu Software Center better because it's more like the App Store and more user-friendly in my opinion. But still, so that's that. Lubuntu works extremely well, extremely quick. Firefox is amazing on this operating system because it's such a lightweight system. Oh, and it also reminds me, I wanted to show, where is it? Sorry guys, here it is. Now I had to load a lot of programs to get this stuff to work, but when I say that, there's no actual system specs programs on Lubuntu. You have to actually install it yourself. Why did it do that? Oh yeah, the other problem with Lubuntu is when you swipe it left on the trackpad, it likes to go wild sometimes. Hey, stop that. Sorry. Like I say, it's still worth installing Linux, but as you can see, it's sometimes a pain. But yeah, it's working. It's working quite well, other than the trackpad issues and the lack of sound. But let's see here. And now it's scrolling itself. Stop that. But yeah, it's working. It's working amazingly well. The only problem I have with Lubuntu, other than the sound, the trackpad thing's not too bad. HTML5 video doesn't seem to be working, so YouTube's not running. If I can get YouTube to run, I guarantee you it's going to be a lot smoother. On Mate, for some reason, it seems to run slower than in Leopard, which is the complete and total opposite on my PowerBook G5s. Don't know why, but still, Lubuntu does something Mate can't do well. Lubuntu can use full Facebook, and it's pretty darn quick. As we can see here, this is all real time, and watch this. If it loads, there we go. It's actually pretty quick, as we can see. It's using the full Facebook, and it's working quite well. And if we go into, for instance, low-end Mac here, it will load it up. And of course, all PowerPC systems, the G4s anyway, Facebook's still a little slow. But out of all the operating systems, you can actually use Facebook on this without wanting to pull your hair out all the time anyway. Yes, it's still not the quickest experience. Yeah, I'm going over all my, I'm getting tongue-tied there. But anyway, it's a lot quicker, and for some reason this is actually giving me problems. It hasn't been doing that, but hey, wow, that's kind of embarrassing while I'm filming. But yes, it works. I promise you, it works really quick. It's just not cooperating right now. Yeah, but it's scrolling. It does everything nice and smooth, considering. And like I said, the system's still very usable for today. Out of all the PowerPCs, this is the most usable mobile-wise anyway. The Power Macs are still more mobile-friendly. I mean, user-friendly in the modern world. They're not mobile for sure, but this is the most usable mobile system. And it shows. It's very impressive what it can do, and it's very, very quick and snappy. And you know, I'm very happy with it. And it looks like I have a software update. I do. I've got some software updates here. So I'll be updating this right now. Hey, maybe it will actually make it run a little better. You know, Lubuntu is still supported too, and coincidentally, that Firefox is also Firefox 47, I think. But as we can see, it's going pretty quick doing updates. Lubuntu is very useful. In fact, I like it better than Mate when it comes to usability, performance-wise. But when it comes to you know, aesthetics and features, I like Mate better. So if I could combine Lubuntu with working speakers and fix the HTML5 video problem and get all the programs I use on Mate on Lubuntu, I'd probably switch over to this on this system. But right now, that's basically it for my PowerBook G4 high resolution here. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I've been putting it off for a while because this system had some issues, which I think was more hardware related. I finally worked all the kinks out of it. I think this system was a little sick when I first got it. The SSD I put in it, like in episode 2 of last season, it sometimes wouldn't recognize it at all, and you'd have to actually reset the system and the PRAM, the PRAM, you know, to get it to recognize. I don't know why it did that, but one day I finally got it to reset, and I jiggled it a little bit. Something must have been loose in it, and all the connections met up, and presto, this thing works fine. That's why I was putting it off, because it was a bit of a pain to get working properly. But it works properly now, and it's a very, very cool system. As you can see, the battery works fine. We just unplugged it. You know, bingo, no problems. Shoot, we just played a game on it with the battery running on it instead of it being plugged in, and it took it like a champ. So, yeah. Anyway, so that was my PowerBook G4 High Resolution, and I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. Thank you for watching this video, and this has been a Rutke Mods video.